What's going on? Move the Mouse here, back in City Skylines, the town of Grand Lakes, with our Let's Play Season 8, Episode number 6. And this week we're doing things a little bit different. So I wanted to get a ton of stuff done this week, and we're on a 2-episode week schedule, so I figured I'd do a little time lapse, if you will. Basically, I did a build, and people like to see everything that happens along the way. So I went ahead and recorded about an hour and 10 minutes of footage, and we're speeding it up at 300% speed. So hopefully it's not annoying to look at. It's something, a slightly different format I wanted to try, specifically when we want to cram a bunch of build into one episode. And you know, I don't know that kind of what happens here is enough for, you know, its own Let's Play. I wanted to kind of stamp out some different patterns, and in this case that we're seeing right here on the screen right now is kind of extending another arterial road that goes through that new modern city center that kind of will link up with our 4-lane road, which is going to run through the city center on the other side and through our old town, which is kind of what we're starting to build out today. Now, I wanted to kind of make this feel like a grid, but an old sloppy grid. So because the road is curved, like we can get a couple of roads in really tight right here, but as we start to branch out to other segments and build roads off of that, I wanted to kind of snap them together in a way, and actually I had some problems with the snap point right here, but I wanted to snap them together in a way where, again, it felt like a box, it felt like a grid, but since it's built off that old curvy road that the town was built off of, it's naturally going to be a little lopsided, a little funky, a little bit of a rhombus instead of a rectangle. So essentially with the old town here, I wanted to give the buildings a different feel, a different look, as well as a different layout. So it's a much looser grid than we saw over in the modern city center area, and something that you'll see kind of in older cities that were built up way back in the day. They may not have been planned out so much on a grid. They may not be, you know, these perfect slices of grid like most of Manhattan is. Right now we've got a ton, just unbelievable amount of demand for industrial, which we're meeting for the most part with office space where we can. Though in the next episode, I think we're going to actually work on our industrial area and kind of move that around. But because we had all that office demand, or technically industrial demand, I figured temporarily for the main street we could actually put some offices on there. It'll probably be commercial in the future, but in order to do what I wanted for the old town, we had to paint a district there. And we're going to define a high-rise band so that regardless of what we do, whether it's low or high-density residential, commercial, industrial, office, it's going to prevent those buildings from getting to their top level and getting too tall. We've also stamped down the setting, or the theme style for European suburbia. So we'll take a look and see if, you know, that gives us a dramatically different style. We just want different parts of the town to feel a little different. They were built up at different times in their history. This one a little bit backwards, since Old Town's one of the last things that we're doing. Now that we've hit 22,000, the first thing that I wanted to do, and you'll notice I didn't miss a beat here, was get rid of our old get rid of our old water treatment plants in favor of the eco water treatment plants. So I want to get those hooked in right away so we can start pushing that bubble of polluted water off the map. You can actually see it is quite literally off the map. While I was in here, I also thought it would make sense to kind of drop some extra buildings in, turn off the ones that we didn't need, and then in order to get the water production up to about the same level, I added a few pumps and turned them on and off until I got kind of both green lines for sewage and water treatment to about the same spot. All of our budgets are up right now at 100%, so it's just easier. I'm in there. I'm going to snap a few extra water towers to the sidewall of that canal and just be prepared for the future. Now over here, these are getting a little bit close to the highway. So in a moment, we're going to break out the sound barriers and give a little bit of a break to our citizens that live too close to the highway there. Now we do have a ton of residential demand. I shouldn't say a ton. It's not off the chart or anything. But as that starts to fill up, not only do we want to meet that with fresh zone residential space, but when the demand is up, we also want to think about potentially moving some people out from our other island over there where we started to kind of stamp out our town. Again, that's still a big fix-it-later project on that island. And I don't want to move everybody out all at once because it's going to hit our bank account way too hard. But again, as we see the need for especially residential and commercial, which is what's zoned over on that island, as we see those crop up, we're going to want to remove and move out some people from that old zoning on that island. And then because there's demand, we'll at least kind of be keeping our population level, if not gaining people by moving a bunch of people out when a bunch of people want to move in at the same time. So again, one big fix it later project over here. And yeah, again, we'll just kind of de-zone and break streets as we can to slowly move people out. We're still a few episodes out from getting started over here, but I figured we'd really get started once we're a little bit closer to the top tier milestones. We're still a ways off from that, but we've only got a couple left to go. We've got a little bit of abandonment happening here and there, but nothing too bad. For the most part, the city is pretty well functioning. I mentioned I think I was going to do this soon. You can see some of the houses are very close to the highway there, so giving them a little bit of buffer from that. And where we can't change some of these roads, like those off ramps that are flat on the highway, what we can do is start to spam some trees down there. Now, this is one of the things that I really miss from PC is the forest brush. I wish. Oh, I thought I was going to paint trees here. Sorry. This is the problem of narrating stuff after the fact. So over here, we're just going to use up as much of the space as we can without creating more intersections than we need. And I'm debating in my mind here, do I go with one street kind of tucked in the middle there? But that's way too much overlap. So we'll do a couple streets kind of coming in up and down vertically here, just to really max out the zoning that's possible in this area. Just to really eat up kind of everything we can from a space perspective before we start to feather things out towards the edge of the map. So we'll get those things connected, and again, because we have so much industrial demand, we'll meet that with office space for now. And now we can start to think about, how we fold these neighborhoods together. So we've got this grid here, and you can't repeat it forever. At some point, it's going to run into something that prevents it. So it's okay to have some of these, looser feeling roads. Don't make it too perfect. No city's perfect. If you are going for that cold, hard, calculated grid, that's totally fine. But it's one of those things where the imperfections, I think, kind of make the city feel more alive and more real. We're going to buy one of the tiles here, which is going to let us do two things. It's going to let us keep extending our old town out, but also start to build closer and closer, bridging that gap from farm to modern city with the old town in the middle. Now, I initially was going to put just a three-way intersection in here, but there's a sizable amount of space between the highway and the river that we want to start building out. And rather than snaking a bunch of roads underneath, we will provide some bypass routes later. I thought it would make sense just to have kind of a cloverleaf intersection here. And we'll make this more efficient in a future episode. This is just to get the city going again. But this allows traffic to obviously continue right on down the highway, or to exit to the right or to the left, or I should say above and below the highway, kind of in the orientation that we're looking at here. Now, you've probably seen me do lots of roundabouts before, so nothing new here in the actual creation of the roundabout, but what somebody actually suggested in the comments the other day was where I normally do this, a 4-point brace, you can do kind of an 8-point brace, and it will make it so that you've got some extra nodes to snap to, things won't get distorted, and you can kind of shimmy stuff in a little bit easier, and I think it definitely works. So here I'm just doing a roundabout. I think someone said in the comments, enough with the roundabouts. I actually don't do that many, but they're really good for moving traffic around in City Skylines, especially when you're on console and you don't have mods. If I had the ability to do lane arrows and time traffic lights and traffic manager and all these sorts of things, you probably wouldn't need as many roundabouts. And in fact, it's fun to try and make cities work without them when you're on PC. But it's not so fun to do it on console, unfortunately. Kind of a necessity, so hopefully not too many roundabouts for you. We'll leave those braces just for a minute, but I wish I wrote down who suggested that. But thank you so much for that in the comments. Definitely made assembling that roundabout a little bit easier. Here, I'm just doing kind of a coastal road that's trying to keep the zoning right on the edge of that beach. And we might build houses on that side, but more realistically, we'll probably have houses on the land side, not the water side, and kind of leave that open so that people can have some coastal views. So here, we're just decorating with some trees, and rather than kind of use one brush and spam a bunch of the same tree, I'm kind of spreading it out a little bit here and there. Different types of trees, kind of zigzagging through, throwing in some bushier trees, just so there's some variety. It's nice when you're walking on foot in the third or first person cam that's available on consoles. Unfortunately, the level of detail is so bad on console that, you know, as soon as you kind of zoom out from these trees, they stop animating half their textures 10 feet away. So, you know, it does give it a nice touch graphically, I think. It gives you a nice visual separation between the zones. It also prevents some of the noise from coming through between the zones, which is good, but Office isn't going to cause that much problem for residential. If we eventually switch that over to commercial later, that would be very necessary. Now, something that I definitely need to go and clean up in my city, and you should do every once in a while, is your traffic light situation. So here, the basic principle is to keep the traffic flowing as much as possible on the main and arterial roads, the collector roads. You know, if that main street's carrying all the traffic, don't stop that. Stop the stuff on the side streets. And when you turn off the main road onto the side streets, stop the side streets from that road, right? You want to just keep the traffic moving as much as possible and stop it as far down the chain as you can to prevent those buildups in the different intersections around your city. Time for a little more tree spam over here, and I just kind of wanted to get a feel for what this would look like if we had some trees kind of planted up the middle of the highway. A little bit of buffer, again, for sound and visual separation for those people that live here right next to this highway exit. And same thing, just kind of zigzagging through the pattern with some different trees, and then using a brush to kind of fill in a little bit of space, but we'll come back and kind of tighten that up as we go. You can see the European suburb buildings definitely kind of have a similar visual feel, but we'll do some different neighborhoods, some different styles, but it's always good to stamp a style down and change up just the visual appearance a little bit. Now, one really big project in today's video was kind of completely redesigning this farm. Now that we are at level 5, we have access to all the large fields. You can see these are the large crop fields in comparison to the small fruit and crop fields just across the road. Basically, I just wanted to kind of maximize the space. So the larger extractor buildings, which in this case are producing either crops or animal products, they take up a little bit more space on the road and obviously a little bit more depth, but they produce a lot more goods in comparison to the number of tiles they take up on the road. So what I'm doing is I'm upgrading to one of each type of the large fields. In this case, I want to say corn, potatoes. I was going to say tobacco, but I'm pretty sure that's Tropico. And I'm just making room and kind of extending the grid a little bit. We're going to do one of each type. So 4 different types of fields, and then this last one can be a greenhouse. And then we're going to do 4 different types of trees and fruit trees, and then a greenhouse next to that. But in order to do that, in order to make space across the street, we're going to have to actually move a bunch of things around, and I'm kind of getting a feel for how big this space is going to require. Now, for these buildings that are producing goods, you're not really losing anything by demolishing them like that. If you were to demolish a warehouse or a grain silo, you'd be deleting all the stock that was there inside of it. Generally, these things are producing goods and then either shipping them directly off map, shipping them to a storage container, or shipping them to some other kind of processing facility like the flour mill, for example. In order to get all this in this area, I'm going to have to move these barracks. And what you can see me doing here is just kind of measuring the road. You can draw from one node to another, see how long or how much cost there is associated with that, and you can basically build that same segment on the other side to make a nice even grid without having to count out. So we'll get all the barracks out of the way. Barracks increase the worker count and the efficiency of the zone, so generally a good thing to add in. But we need to make some space, so again, we're getting some of the roads out of here, tucking those barracks all together, and then the next thing we need to do is kind of move these out of here. So just moving those to the other side of the road. For right now, it is the firehouse and the police house, which, you know, we kind of built into the farm property, but we're gonna have some other farms and other industrial areas cropping up over here, so we'll eventually need to upgrade those to larger police and fire stations. But for now, that will do the trick and keep this area well covered. Now, from an animal pen perspective, again, same sort of thing. you can basically just use up a little bit more road real estate, number of kind of squares you're tying up on the road for the larger pens, but they'll also produce a lot more. In order to make room for those, we're gonna tuck the warehouses in over here. These are storing my animal products, and the grain silos are storing all the excess crops. Now, I make kind of a noob mistake here, but I love to leave this stuff in, so let me talk about kind of what's happening here. If I had been thinking about this better, the larger grain silos probably would have been a better idea, because again, as you step up in building size, you also step up in its capacity. So the number of squares you're tying up on a road compared to the amount of capacity you have for storing that good is actually much better in the large grain silos. So unfortunately, what I did here was I move every single one of these one by one, as you have to do on console. And when I was done and let it play for a minute, I saw just this awful traffic congestion I was creating by kind of having everything over on this one spot of the map. It wasn't really serviced that great roads wise, and it was just causing all kinds of problems. So I'll move those again in a minute, but that lets us kind of free up some space here, move the crop fields kind of across from one another, and then move the greenhouses across from one another. Now, something really kind of finicky and funky was happening here. I went to kind of connect the roads around this, and it brought that corner of the farm up. So I figured, oh, let me try that again. No, now it brought the corner of the farm down. So I delete it and try again and again. So what I did was broke out the level tool. But in any event, I couldn't quite get that to go the way I wanted. When you play it, the animals are very well behaved. It's very nice of them. They all go from where they were to their new pen. They even walk straight through walls to get there. But very well behaved animals. I'm surprised how well trained they are, that they would go right back to their pens on the other side of the farm. I am trying to remember to do my academic reports from my university every year, because there is an achievement for, I believe, completing 100 academic works, and I stopped at like 16 because that's what unlocks the last level of prestige for your university. And I didn't even know at the time that there was an achievement tied to that. Just back to rounding out the farm here, and we've got space for 4 large animal pens. So we'll do cows, Highland cows, sheeps, and pigs. And get rid of the other animal pens over there. It wouldn't let me snap where I wanted it to, which is a little weird. So I decided to give it a little bit of space between the building, the greenhouse, and the animal pen there. Now this is just connecting this with some very basic roads for now, because the flour mill and the bakery weren't getting any goods. They were temporarily disconnected on the roadways there. I don't recall why I set those to empty. Maybe they were out of goods. But either way, I think I set those back to balance pretty soon. Now, here I'm just kind of flipping through just to make sure I'm kind of understanding everything right. But there's a bunch of different ways to kind of process goods. A bunch of different ways you can chain these things together. If it's a cattle shed or a slaughterhouse, they're basically doing the exact same thing an animal pasture is, which is taking crops and giving you animal products. And some of them pollute and some of them don't. Some have noise pollution, others don't. So it is something to consider if you're building this anywhere close to other resources. You know, what's the noise pollution like if you're moving it next to people? So just be kind of careful where you do those processing units. But just keep in mind there's multiple ways to do those. And if you want all of one type of building because it doesn't pollute, or one type of building because it does, I don't know why you would want that. But whatever, if you just want to go for like a certain look or feel, you can kind of get all the different styles of buildings in. Now for this, like you can see, there's a ton of overlap in those zones. But what I'm going for is some kind of loose organic streets, right? They kind of don't need to be this tight grid, and they can kind of curve around each other and use elements of the terrain or elements like, you know, the highway to kind of choose where the bend goes and then make the other roads parallel to that. The basic principles apply of road hierarchy, no matter what you're doing, whether it's straight roads or curved roads. The further you get from the highway, the more often your intersections can be. Now here you can see we've got I'll come back to that point in one second. We've got a quick death wave happening. It's pretty obvious at 3 times speed. So drop a couple cemeteries in here and hope for the best. Hope they can process all those bodies. But we'll get our just keep extending our water coverage there, and making sure that people are happy. We've got 23,000 people in the town right now. Not too bad, not too shabby. 3 million in the bank, so I can't complain about that. That's kind of what happened in an hour build. It's kind of rough, rapid fire, going back through all this, but it's literally 3 times the building that would have happened in a normal episode, and I still got to show you kind of every step along the way. But I understand this may not be everyone's cup of tea. I wanted to try something a little different this week, just to see if I could kind of assemble episodes in this manner. I've seen some other creators do it. It's not as engaging for me, though, I find as a viewer. It doesn't really bother me either way as a creator, but I figured I'd just try something a little bit different. But let me know what you think, because I'm still leaning towards the slower play-by-play live commentary, where this is me recording an hour of footage, speeding up 3 times, then kind of talking back through what I did along the way. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Follow me on Twitter, join the Discord. Links in the description down below. If you'd like to support the channel, of course, there's links to that also. But let me know what you think of this format versus a traditional Let's Play. I'm going to do one more of these on Friday because I'd like to cram in maybe another hour of building. So hopefully you enjoyed. If you didn't, though, let me know in the comments down below too, because constructive feedback is always appreciated. I'm going to be working on a new tutorial very soon, so keep an eye out for the channel for that. Subscribe if you're new. Hit the bell to get notifications. And until the next one, thanks so much for tuning in. This is Move the Mouse, signing off.